I knew I was finished the moment Bradley called an emergency board meeting with a subject line that read, "Employee IP violation, urgent action required," and CC'd me like I was evidence instead of a person. This wasn't a Wednesday morning discussion about project timelines or team performance. This was an execution. And Bradley, my boss of 7 years who I'd personally made look competent through countless late nights and weekend fire drills, was sharpening the blade. Let me back up because this story doesn't start with betrayal. It starts with exhaustion. Specifically, the kind of exhaustion that comes from building someone else's empire while your own bank account stays stubbornly static. I'm Rachel Torres. For 7 years, I worked as senior engineering lead at Cortex Systems, a mid-sized software company that specialized in enterprise data solutions. Boring name. Boring industry. But stable work, decent benefits, and theoretically, room for growth. Theoretically. When I joined Cortex, I was 26 years old, fresh from a startup that had imploded spectacularly, and desperate for stability. Bradley Mitchell, VP of Engineering, hired me with promises about fast-track advancement, competitive compensation, and recognition for top performers. I believed him. That was my first mistake. Year 1, I built their entire cloud migration infrastructure. Solo. Nights and weekends included. Bradley presented it to the board as his strategic initiative. I got a handshake and a "really appreciate your hustle" email. Year 2, I led the team that secured their largest enterprise client. A healthcare company worth $40 million in annual recurring revenue. Bradley got promoted to senior VP. I got a 5% raise that didn't even match inflation. Year 3, I asked for a promotion to principal engineer. Bradley said budget constraints. Then hired his former college roommate for a newly created principal architect role at 40% more than my salary. I should have left. Everyone told me to leave. But I stayed because I believed that merit eventually wins. That hard work eventually gets recognized. That loyalty eventually matters. I was wrong on all 3 counts. By year 6, I was technically leading the highest performing engineering team in the company. We had the best delivery metrics. The fewest production incidents. The highest employee satisfaction scores. I had 3 people reporting to me who earned more than I did because they'd negotiated better or joined more recently. When I raised this to Bradley, he said, "Rachel, you're so valuable in your current role. We can't afford to disrupt team dynamics by changing your compensation structure right now." Translation: you're too useful where you are, so we're going to keep underpaying you and hope you don't notice. I noticed. That's when I started building something of my own. Not out of revenge. Out of survival. Because I realized that Cortex would never value me appropriately, and I needed to create my own path. I started small. A weekend project. A tool I'd wanted for years but had never seen built properly. A lightweight data validation framework that could integrate with existing enterprise systems without requiring complete infrastructure overhauls. I built it entirely on my own time. My own laptop. My own cloud development environment that I paid for personally. 0 Cortex resources. 0 Cortex code. I was meticulous about this because I understood intellectual property law. I'd seen too many engineers get burned by employers claiming ownership of side projects. I used none of Cortex proprietary code. I didn't work on it during business hours. I didn't use company equipment. I didn't even think about it during my commute because technically my employment contract said work hours included reasonable travel time. I treated my side project like a separate life. And slowly, carefully, it started working. I soft-launched the framework as an open-source project. Put it on GitHub. Wrote documentation. Created example implementations. Within 3 months, I had 500 stars. Within 6 months, 2,000. Companies started reaching out. Small startups mostly. Asking if I did consulting. Asking if I'd build custom implementations. Asking if they could pay me. I said yes. Set up an LLC. Structured everything properly. Filed all the paperwork. Started taking consulting clients on weekends and evenings. Nothing that interfered with my Cortec responsibilities. Nothing that competed with Cortec's business. Just me, helping companies implement a tool I'd built independently. The consulting income started surpassing my Cortec salary. Not immediately. But month by month, it grew. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to hope. Then Bradley found out. I don't know how exactly. Maybe someone mentioned it casually. Maybe he saw my LinkedIn activity. Maybe he was just threatened by the idea that I had something he didn't control. But 3 weeks ago, he called me into his office with an expression I'd never seen before. Not angry. Calculating. Rachel, I hear you've been doing some outside work. I'd prepared for this conversation. Yes. I have a consulting practice. Completely separate from Cortec. I work on it during personal time using personal resources. It doesn't interfere with my responsibilities here. What kind of consulting? Data validation frameworks. Helping companies implement better data quality systems. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Using expertise you developed here at Cortec. Using general industry knowledge, yes. Not Cortec proprietary information or code. Rachel, you understand that your employment contract gives Cortec ownership of any intellectual property developed during your employment, right? My contract specifies IP developed using company resources or during work hours. My consulting practice uses neither. We'll see about that. I'm going to need you to provide documentation of this consulting business. Client lists, project descriptions, code repositories. Everything. Bradley, that's my personal business. It's not related to Cortec. Then you won't mind sharing it. If it's truly independent, you have nothing to worry about. But if there's any overlap with Cortec's business interests or utilizes any Cortec resources, we'll need to address that. It wasn't a request. It was a threat. I should have refused. Should have immediately contacted an attorney. Should have recognized this for what it was, an attempt to claim ownership of something I'd built independently because Bradley couldn't tolerate the idea of me succeeding outside his control. But I was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of justifying my worth. So I provided some information. Not everything. But enough to prove the consulting practice was legitimate and independent. That was 2 weeks ago. Yesterday, I received the calendar invitation. Emergency board meeting, employee IP violation. Today, I walked into that meeting knowing exactly what Bradley planned to do. The conference room was fuller than I expected. Bradley sat at the head of the table, flanked by Cortec CEO, Martin Ashford, and their outside legal counsel, a sharp-eyed attorney named Patricia Vaughn who looked like she charged $800 per hour. 3 board members were on video conference. Martin's executive assistant sat in the corner, taking notes. And me. The accused. Bradley started without preamble. Thank you all for making time on short notice. We've discovered a significant intellectual property violation that requires immediate board attention. Rachel Torres, who many of you know as one of our senior engineers, has been operating a competing business using Cortec's proprietary expertise and potentially our code. I kept my expression neutral. Didn't interrupt. Let him continue. Over the past several months, Rachel has been consulting for outside companies, providing data validation services that directly compete with Cortec's offerings. She's been using knowledge and expertise developed during her employment here to profit personally. Martin looked at me. Rachel, is this accurate? Parts of it. I do have a consulting practice. It doesn't compete with Cortec's business, and it doesn't use any Cortec proprietary information or code. Bradley slid a printed document across the table. We reviewed the consulting projects you disclosed. Multiple clients are in industries where Cortec operates. You're providing services nearly identical to what we offer our enterprise clients. I'm providing open source tools that I developed independently. CoreTech provides comprehensive enterprise data solutions. They're not comparable offerings. Patricia, the attorney, spoke for the first time. Ms. Torres, your employment contract Section 7 explicitly states that CoreTech owns all intellectual property developed during the term of your employment. That includes frameworks, code, and methodologies. Can you confirm you signed this agreement? Yes, I signed it. And I'm fully compliant with it. Section 7 specifies IP developed using company time or resources. My consulting practice uses neither. The contract doesn't make that distinction. Actually, it does. Section 7, paragraph 2, employee-created intellectual property developed independently, during non-work hours, using non-company resources, and not related to company business interests, remains the property of the employee. That's standard employment contract language in California. Patricia's expression didn't change, but I saw her jaw tighten slightly. She hadn't expected me to know my own contract better than she did. Bradley leaned forward. Rachel, stop playing lawyer. The reality is simple. You developed expertise here. You learned data validation working on CoreTech projects. You're now selling that expertise to other companies. That's theft of intellectual property. That's called having a career, Bradley. If that logic held, every employee who ever changed jobs would be committing IP theft. I developed general industry skills. I applied them independently. That's not illegal or unethical. Martin raised a hand. Rachel, I want to understand your perspective. But I also need to understand the risk to CoreTech. Bradley, what are you recommending? 2 things. First, Rachel needs to cease all consulting activities immediately and transfer any client relationships to CoreTech. Second, we need to conduct a full audit of any code she's developed to ensure no CoreTech IP was used. If we find violations, we'll pursue legal action. The room went quiet. I could hear the ventilation system humming. Someone coughed on the video conference. This was it. The moment where I either accepted defeat or fought back. I reached into my bag. Pulled out a folder. Placed it on the conference table. Before this goes further, I'd like everyone to review something. This is my original offer letter from CoreTech. 7 years ago. When Bradley hired me. I slid copies to Martin, Patricia, and the board members in the room. Page 2, 3rd paragraph. I'd like you to read it carefully. Bradley's expression changed. Rachel, that's ancient history, read it, Bradley. Martin picked up his copy. Started reading. His eyebrows went up. Patricia read her copy. Put it down slowly. One of the board members unmuted. Is this legitimate? Martin looked at Bradley. Did you include this language in Rachel's offer letter? It was 7 years ago. Standard recruiting language to attract senior talent, Bradley. This explicitly states that Rachel retains full ownership of any work product developed outside of company time and resources. It specifically excludes side projects and independent consulting from CoreTech's IP claims. This directly contradicts what you just told us. I kept my voice level. Professional. When Bradley recruited me, I was coming from a startup. I told him I valued the ability to work on side projects. He agreed and included that language in my offer letter as an incentive. It supersedes the standard employment contract language because it's a specific negotiated term. Patricia was flipping through papers now. Probably reviewing the standard employment contract against my offer letter. This is valid, she said finally. The offer letter creates a specific exception to the general IP clause. If Ms. Torres can demonstrate her consulting practice was developed independently, CoreTech has no claim to it. Bradley's face had gone red. This is ridiculous. She's profiting from work we trained her to do, Bradley. Martin cut him off. Stop. Just stop. He looked at me. Rachel, can you prove your consulting work was done independently? Outside work hours, without company resources? I'd been preparing for this question for 2 years. Yes. I have time-stamped GitHub commits showing all development occurred outside business hours. Cloud service billing records in my personal name. Client contracts through my LLC, which was formed legally and separately. Email records showing all client communication from my personal email. I can provide everything. Martin leaned back in his chair. Looked at the ceiling. Then at Bradley. How did we get here? Martin, she's competing with us. She's consulting on weekends using a tool she built independently with contractual permission to do exactly that. And you just tried to claim ownership of her work in front of the board and our attorney without apparently reading her offer letter first. The room went silent again. One of the board members on video spoke up. Martin, I recommend we end this meeting. It appears CoreTech has no legal standing here. Bradley, your concerns about competition may be valid, but that's a business strategy discussion, not an IP violation. Another board member chimed in. I'd also like to understand how one of our senior engineers felt the need to build a separate income stream in the first place. Rachel, what's your current compensation? I told them. There was an uncomfortable pause. And you're leading our highest performing team? Yes. Bradley, what's the salary range for that role? Bradley looked cornered. Rachel's compensation is competitive for her current level. What level is that? Senior engineering lead. And how long has she held that role? 7 years. The board member's voice got colder. So Rachel has been in the same role, at relatively flat compensation, for 7 years, while presumably watching other people get promoted around her. And then when she builds something independently using contractually protected time, you accuse her of theft. Do I have that right? Martin closed his eyes. Patricia, what's our legal exposure here? If we'd pursued this formally? Substantial. Wrongful termination claims, violation of contract terms, possibly retaliation. As it stands, we need to end this meeting and apologize to Ms. Torres. Bradley stood up abruptly. This is absurd. Bradley, sit down or leave. Martin's voice was steel. You brought an IP violation claim without reviewing the relevant contracts. You wasted board time. And you've potentially created a hostile work environment for one of our best engineers. We're done here. Patricia started gathering papers. For the record, CoreTech has no claim to Ms. Torres's consulting practice or the intellectual property she developed independently. The offer letter language is unambiguous. Martin looked at me. Rachel, I apologize. This meeting should never have happened. Can we talk privately after this? We can talk. But I need to be clear, Martin. This isn't just about the meeting. This is about 7 years of being undervalued, underpaid, and watching people with less expertise get promoted around me. And now being accused of theft for building something independently during my personal time. I understand. And I'd like to discuss how we address that. But first, I want to make sure you know CoreTech values your contributions. I stood up. Collected my folder. Martin, I'll take that meeting. But I'm also going to be honest. My consulting practice is succeeding because I built something valuable and people recognize that value. CoreTech hasn't recognized my value in 7 years. I'm not sure one conversation changes that. I walked out. Didn't look at Bradley. Didn't need to. Behind me, I heard one of the board members say, Martin, we need to discuss Bradley's judgment. This was a disaster. I went back to my desk. Sat down. Stared at my monitors. My phone buzzed. Text from Jennifer, my teammate who sat 3 cubes over. What happened? Bradley looks like he swallowed glass. I typed back, just defended my right to exist as a human being outside of CoreTech. Standard Tuesday. 3 hours later, I was in Martin's office. Alone this time. No Bradley. No attorneys. Just the CEO and the engineer he'd failed to retain. Rachel, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you an explanation of how we're going to fix this. I'm listening. First, Bradley will no longer be your direct manager. You'll report to me temporarily while we restructure. Second, we're conducting a comprehensive compensation review for your entire team. If people are underpaid relative to market and performance, we're correcting that. Including you. That's a start. Third, I want to offer you a promotion to VP of Engineering Architecture. 25% salary increase, equity grant, and a formal acknowledgement that your contributions have been foundational to Cortex's success. I didn't respond immediately. Let him sit with the silence. Martin, 6 months ago that offer would have changed my life. Today, my consulting practice generates more than that VP salary. And I did it in less than a year by actually valuing my own work. He nodded slowly. So you're leaving? I'm considering it. Because here's what I learned, Martin. For 7 years, I waited for Cortex to recognize my value. It never happened. Then I recognized my own value, built something independently, and suddenly I'm accused of theft. That tells me everything about Cortex culture. What if I could change that culture? Can you? Because from where I sit, the problem isn't just Bradley. It's a system that undervalues technical excellence while overvaluing political relationships. Bradley got promoted multiple times while I stayed static. Not because he was better. Because he played the game better. You're right. And that's on me as CEO. I should have caught this years ago. I stood up. Martin, I appreciate the offer. I genuinely do. But I need time to decide if this is where I want to build my career. My consulting practice is proof I can build something valuable independently. I'm not sure I want to give that up. Keep the consulting practice. I'm not asking you to shut it down. I'm asking you to consider building with us while also building for yourself. That caught me off guard. You'd allow that? Rachel, you had a contract that explicitly permitted it. Bradley violated that contract, not you. If you stay, we honor that agreement completely. You consult on weekends. You build your practice. And during work hours, you help us build something better here. Why? Why make that offer now? Because watching you walk out of that conference room, I realized Cortex has been stupid. We had someone brilliant building for us and we treated you like you were replaceable. You're not. And if you leave, we'll spend 2 years trying to replace you and fail. I looked at him. Really looked. Trying to assess if this was genuine or just panic. I'll think about it. But Martin, if I stay, things change. I'm not going back to being the person who works miracles and gets thanked with handshakes. I want authority. I want recognition. And I want the compensation that reflects the value I actually provide. Done. Take a week. Think about it. The offer stands regardless. I left his office. Went home. Poured a glass of wine. Opened my laptop. My consulting practice client portal showed 3 new inquiries. I responded to all of them. Scheduled calls. Then I opened a spreadsheet. 2 columns. Stay at Cortex. Leave Cortex. I started filling it in. Financial comparison. Growth potential. Work-life balance. Values alignment. By the time I finished, the answer was clear. I called Martin the next morning. I've made my decision. I'm listening. I'll stay. On 3 conditions. First, the VP role and compensation you offered, in writing, with a contract I can have my attorney review. Second, I want quarterly check-ins with you personally about team health and compensation equity. Not filtered through management. Direct access. Third, I want it explicitly documented that my consulting practice is separate and Cortex has no claim to it, now or in the future. Done, done, and done. I'll have Patricia draft everything today. One more thing, Martin. What happens to Bradley? Silence. Then, Bradley is being reassigned. Non-management role. Significant compensation reduction. The board made that decision yesterday after reviewing the meeting recording. He created legal liability and damaged employee trust. That has consequences. Good. Because if Bradley stayed in leadership, I wouldn't. You can't have managers who view employee success as theft. Agreed. Rachel, welcome to the leadership team. Actually, properly this time. I hung up. Looked at my consulting practice dashboard. Looked at my Cortec email. For the first time in 7 years, I felt something close to balance. Not because Cortex suddenly became perfect. But because I'd built leverage. I'd proven I could succeed independently. And that proof gave me the power to negotiate from a position of strength rather than desperation. 2 weeks later, I was in my first executive leadership meeting as VP of Engineering Architecture. My salary had increased by 43%. My equity grant was substantial. And my consulting practice was still growing. Bradley sent me an email. Subject, apology. I almost deleted it. But curiosity won. Rachel, I handled the IP situation poorly. I let ego override judgment. You deserved better. I'm sorry for questioning your integrity. You're brilliant and I should have recognized that years ago. I hope Cortec treats you better going forward. Bradley. It wasn't eloquent. But it was acknowledgement. I filed it away. 3 months later, my consulting practice hit a milestone. 100,000 monthly recurring revenue. I was working Cortec full-time during business hours. Building my own company nights and weekends. And I'd never been more successful. Not because I chose between employment and entrepreneurship. But because I'd built contracts that let me do both. Because I'd documented everything properly. Because I'd known my rights before someone tried to violate them. My name is Rachel Torres. My boss tried to claim ownership of the startup I built independently because he couldn't handle me succeeding outside his control. So I pulled out the contract language I'd negotiated 7 years earlier, stopped his claim in front of the board, and turned that meeting into leverage for the promotion and compensation I should have had all along. Thanks for watching, corporate survivors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're probably in your reassigned non-management role wondering how someone stole success by actually reading their own contract. Good luck with that learning experience.